Welcome to A Real Point of View, everybody. This is your host, Greg Morgan. I am here with my good friend and co-host, Mr. Larry Domkowski, and he is the must-see movies film critic on the internet, and I am the real movie guy on the internet, and you can check me out on Twitter at A Real Movie Guy. And our conversation today is about Wes Craven, Wes Craven's films, horror films like Nightmare on Elm Street, Scream, just to mention a few, and just horror films in general. We had a conversation about Wes Craven and his films earlier on Blog Talk Radio, and so this is our after show, and we just wanted to talk about a little bit more about Wes Craven, a little bit more about films, some comparisons, some information, and horror films in general. So why don't we go ahead and just kind of get an overview about your feelings about Wes Craven, Larry? How'd you like his films, and what's your favorite film? What's the least favorite film of the horror films that he has basically presented to the world?
Well, I think that Wes Craven added a lot to the American movie industry. Specifically the Western horror picture. He did a lot of blending with classic horror from before, with the slasher films that had come before, to create a whole new way of doing the modern American horror film. We see this in at its best with Scream, especially the first film. But what's interesting is like later on or in Scream but before that in Nightmare on Elm Street. It was really about the third or the fourth film on Nightmare on Elm Street. That's when he started to relax a little bit and started to show his sense of humor. Mm-hmm. And he brought what he learned about that to Scream and gave us something that was far different and no one had expected before. He also learned how to tell a story in a very specific way, with the visual narrative, and Scream does it like we were mentioning before. In the first scene of Scream with Barrymore, we see him give us the language and how he's going to tell the film, mm-hmm. And it works real well. And like we had mentioned on Blog Talk Radio, we see something that at first appears to be, classical horror and with slasher elements, and then eventually there's a big twist to it, and it's a huge twist. And as that twist comes by, the slasher elements go away, and all we are left is horror. And not necessarily the kind of horror that we're used to, but the kind of horror that we get with Alfred Hitchcock, where we're a part of this now. We see ourselves not in the role of the victim, but in the role of the bad guys. And that's where that real horror comes in, through my own failings, through my own sins, through my own imperfection, is where classic horror lives, and we become even more afraid. So when that thing goes bump in the night, on one hand, as the victim, I'm going, oh no, what's that bump in the night? But what makes that bump in the night something more than just a bump is my own imagination, the way I think, the way I live, and my own imperfections. And so we we justify that, and we try to balance that out with it's out there, but it really isn't. It's already in here, and he does a great job at bringing that to the screen, especially in the movie screen.
Now, it's interesting. You were talking about many times we watch horror films and we're very sympathetic and empathetic to the victim. But if I'm understanding you correctly, the victim in this case could be us. The slasher and the killer, the person who's doing all these horrendous and hideous things, could be us. It could very well be on either side of the situation. And I think a lot of times when you look through the eyes of, as a term, in many of these films, especially horror films or murder thrillers, things of that nature, we're finding ourselves even that much more vulnerable than we were before as we're watching and being sympathetic to the character on screen. So these have become not just watching for what we expect is going to happen, because it seems to me a lot of times we expect certain things to happen, certain kinds of hands reaching out or coming around a corner. But now we're also looking at, how should I do this? How can I do this to get that person and put them at bay? Or what's going on? I'm just living my normal life, and so what is all this craziness that's going on around me? So now we're looking at this movie almost like in a circle, a full circle of being a part of this film, not just as a bystander. You know, we've always, I think, yelled at the screen like, "Oh, look out, look out!" But now you're like, almost feel like you're the one running. You're the person who's trying to get away, or depending on how you are really conceptualizing this, you're the person like, well, how do I get them? Because they're running into this room. If it were me, I would head them off here. We're looking at this so very differently than we used to look at these things in the past. And that adds to the element of excitement and the element of being a part. I think in this time, this era that we're in now in film and or television even, we want to be a part of what's going on. We want to be a part of the action. And I think Wes Craven, to some degree, was very successful in bringing us in and being almost like we're sitting next to that person, like, well, you know, just going to bring it, like Scream 2, for example. You know, I have become a fan, I'm just going to make a segue here, of Jada Pinkett through other venues. And here she is in this film, she and Michael Epps, no, not Michael Epps, Omar Epps, being in this film. So I'm thinking, oh, okay, I'm getting excited. They didn't last 5 minutes in this film.
It's true.
In Scream 2. Because here you are, you're like, Jada, don't go to the bathroom. Jada, just stay here. Jada, you know, oh my God, my friend's on the stage. I mean, she's bleeding. You know, whatever the situation was. Very few films. Well, let me rephrase that. You don't see as often.
Well, that's true.
And expect to be the main character being eliminated before the movie gets going.
Well, and that was what he tried to do at the beginning of the first Scream movie.
Right.
You know,
Drew Barrymore.
But we all knew about it because they had said that she's just in it for one scene. Yeah. And that was, so we knew that something was going to happen. But, you know, go back to Scream 2. There was something else about Scream 2 that was really amazing. The score, the soundtrack behind everything. It's a brilliant soundtrack. Now, okay, the guy who did this, and I don't know his name, so forgive me, but he took the concepts that were created by Danny Elfman in the first one, and took it and just expanded on it and made it whole. And in doing my research today, I found out that in Billboard for for soundtracks,
Uh-huh.
it's number 50 of the top
Wow,
200.
that's huge. That is huge.
You know, so that means something. That tells you that the family of people that Wes Craven brings together to make these films is great. Now, also something interesting, his best films he didn't produce.
Hmm.
He let somebody else do it. And so he had a really good relationship with his producers to make sure that he was getting what he needed to get from them so he could do his work. Could it have been better? Yeah, because he was never he was never the type of filmmaker that we see, 5-star films out of 4 stars.
Hmm.
You know, and there are always a lot of little mistakes throughout all of his films, but he never let that get in the way. And I have to give him credit for it. He never let that get in the way, and he was never apologetic for not making the perfect film. And that's good because his films work really well in some ways because it's not perfect. And so I got to give him a lot of credit.
Now, what I liked about the film that it reminds me of a little bit is how the concept of serial, or no, not serial, but series. Serial too, of course, obviously.
Right?
Right. But series. And I like that in this film because we go seamlessly from the first film to the next film. And a lot of that's due to the characters and the actors, like Nev Campbell and David Arquette and Courtney Cox, film to film to film to film. Um, it's almost like a family, and you become part of that family, and you're looking at these people, and you're thinking, okay, they made it through that first situation. Now it's a different situation. Oh, that was just a movie. We're just real people now. But what if? But what if? You know.
A lot of people credit credit the guy who made all the Lord of the Rings films for changing films for doing all the filming at once.
Hmm.
It saves a lot of money. It saves time. You know, but back in the 90s, Wes Craven did it with Scream and Scream 2.
Hmm.
Yeah, they had to go back and reshoot some things, yes, but for the most part, that is what he did. He had these two groups together, and he started shooting right away where he could, where the people signed up right away for Scream 2. And had to go back a little bit, but that's what he was doing. He had it all ready to go, and didn't wait 3 years. Thank you, Star Wars. For the next film to come out. He did it right there. Click, click, click. He actually had Scream and Scream 2. In a way, it's one movie with 2 chapters. It's one story. And it makes it and it totally changes it, because here you have, what happens in the first film, and it really has that big twist, and then it happens again.
Right.
Wait a second here, and it tells you something about his warped mind and how he works, and just because the evil's gone doesn't mean the evil's dead.
Right. Evil never is gone. It lurks. It may not be as powerful as it was yesterday, but it lurks until it can build up strength. We know that from these movies. We know that from Lord of the Rings. We know that from Star Trek. We know that from Star Wars. Evil is always around the corner, just lurking.
You know that from James Bond.
And you definitely know that from James Bond. And we're going to be face to face with Evil Inspector. Yeah, now James Bond's he's going to actually see all the evil that's been going on around him.
I can't wait for that film. There's a lot of great films coming out.
Yeah, they are.
Back to our good friend Wes Craven. Again, like, I want to mention that it's real sad that we lost him. He was an excellent an excellent filmmaker. And we had talked a little bit about Wes Craven in society. Does he have staying power? Hell yeah, he's got staying power. He's got the same type of staying power with Freddy Krueger as Julie Andrews has with Mary Poppins. and frankly,
that's horrible too.
If you go to any 15-year-old kid and ask them, who would you rather watch, Mary Poppins or Freddy Krueger? And 9 times out of 10, they're going to say Freddy Krueger.
Of course.
I'm not saying that his film was as good as Mary Poppins. Mary Poppins was an exceptional film, above and beyond other films of multiple genres. But within the world of horror films, Wes Craven ranks at the very top with those 2 films, with those 2 franchises, but specifically with those 2 films.
Yeah, I must admit, I think back in the 80s when Nightmare on Elm Street was first presented, marketed out, and advertised out to the public, I thought then, oh, what a different kind of film. I remember seeing some commercials about it, and I thought, man, this might be pretty good to go see. Now, I don't remember where I saw the movie. I just remember seeing it and thinking to myself, this is really creepy. I think that was my comment. This is really creepy. And I think it's so different and so much better to me than like the Creature of the Black Lagoon. I guess even as a child, I never thought that creature would ever get me. He walked too slow. I could run much faster than that. But how do you run away from something that's in your head? How do you run away from something that's in your dreams? Very difficult. Things in your dreams can hold you down.
Well, yeah, and many people have dreams of chasing or being chased. They're chasing something and they can't quite get there, or they're being chased and they can't quite get away from it. And so he really plays on the things that really bother us, the things that we go to bed with at night. It was a pretty good idea that he figured out how to do it. Now, it's been done before, not in that same way. He didn't very way, but it's been done before, where people start to question the difference between our dreams and reality. And it's been a horror fashion before, where our dreams end and reality begins. And he takes it all into this entirely different realm, and it makes and he tells it in such a fun way. And then on down the line, again using that humor, Greg, to just keep it light where it needs to get light, and it makes us inviting. Now, before I go any further, Greg, and I will, sorry about that.
No, it's fine. Go ahead.
There is a big difference between a horror movie, and scary moments. A lot of films have scary moments, and they'll scare the bejeebies out of you. But that doesn't make it horror. And a good example of a scary moment in film, it's in a horror movie, but it's a scary moment out of a film where it's in Alien when the cat jumps out of the locker.
Right.
It's silly, but it's scary. Funny thing is, it sets us up for the rest of the film. That's real important. It's a monster movie. It's a great monster movie. We never really see the whole monster until it's too late.
Right.
We've already been scared like crazy. And something? Once you see the whole monster, it's not that scary anymore. Now it's just an action film.
Right. What we don't see scares us more than what we see. Good point.
That's right. So, the more our imagination has to nurture the fear in us, the more I'm going to be frightened. The second that you show the whole thing, it's done, it's gone. And this is one of the reasons why slasher movies do so well, is that you see bits and pieces, pardon the pun, you see slices of what's going on, and it's blocked out. And you may see the whole bad guy with the knife, but what you don't see is that in between the guy with the knife and the victim understanding they're about to get killed.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that separation there. I wouldn't call Freddy Krueger a monster movie. I wouldn't call the Jason movies monster movies. I would call them horror.
Yeah. The one concept, and I alluded to it earlier, the one concept that adds to, at least I think adds to what you're discussing here, is the fact that, there are those moments in some films, but I want to go back to that word linger. These films, the essence of what happens early lingers throughout the whole film. So now you're afraid. You're not just scared, you're afraid. There's true fear now. It's fear for what's going to come next. And the thing about it is, it's coming and you can't stop it. That's also, I think, what makes these movies stand out so much is that the evil and the horror, it lingers. It lingers all the way to the end. And it continues because it goes from one movie to the next movie to the next movie. That element of lingering is just as horrific as what you were referring to. I think that's important.
I think we have to look at if we were looking at horror movies, if we're looking at how we view horror movies, we have to, so much of modern American horror with the slasher films, they come out of 1960s Italy, where they were bloodbath films, and there are some rather famous films that came out, like for instance, Kill Baby Kill. That was 1966, I think, something like that. 1966, and there are several others that came, it came out in the early 60s. There's Black Sabbath comes in 1963.
I remember Black Sabbath. I've seen that.
Again, it is a slasher film before there were slasher films, and these films are even before the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Right.
In 1961, The House by the Cemetery. No, that was 81, wasn't it? Yeah. I don't know why I wrote down 61. So sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah. So, and here's one also in the 60s. The Bloody Pit of Horror.
Now, come on. If I heard, I have not seen the movie, but if I heard that title, that is not, unless I really wanted to be scared, that would be a title I just would not come close to. I'm sorry. I just think it's funny because when I hear a title like that, I'm thinking, oh my God, this is.
I remember that's translated from the Italian.
but still.
In our idiom, in the American English idiom, that's not. You're right. That's not a title that I would use. I'd think something else.
Yeah, something to guise or mask what's about to happen. Not just tell me right up front that this is what's going to happen.
Now, there's There's another film that is highly rated, and it's called The Bird with the Crystal Plumage.
Yeah, see, something like that. You don't know what that's really about.
It is another horror film about a serial killer. And it is scary. Really scary. Now, notice I use the word scary. It also is disturbing. Most of these films are disturbing. Castle of Blood, disturbing. These come from this post-World War idea that we're all just fodder.
Yeah, I get that. That's so bad. That's so sad.
And in today's world, we watch these movies and we just laugh. Back then, in the 1960s, when these came out, the only time you'd really see them in the United States was at foreign movie houses or art movie houses.
Yep.
Or some movie houses that specialized in horror now and then. Other than that, in the United States, we didn't see these. We didn't get to see these. We saw a few, but not many. And if we did see them, it was years later on television when the whole thing was edited for television.
Right. Now, I want to introduce something here and talk about two other films. The first one I want to talk about is not a Wes Craven film, but it is along the lines of horror to me. Now, as I alluded to, and I mentioned this on Blog Talk Radio earlier this evening, about films that make you feel like you're a part of the film, but not just that, but something that you feel could actually happen in real life, or something that seems to be, and I'll mention this now, seems to be innocent, and yet can be just as evil as these horrific things that occur. I want to pose, and I pose this to all the listeners and people who are watching us out there. This is a movie that I did see when I was growing up. My wife, however, for many years had seen the movie every year, just like people watch It's a Wonderful Life with Jimmy Stewart during Christmas. My wife and her sister used to watch this all the time. And this is I think, one of the most horrible movies. And this is a movie that involves a child. You know the movie I'm talking about, Larry?
Oh, yes, I do. Oh, yes, I do. I want to hear Tubular Bells. Is it that one, or is it the other one?
Well, I'm referring to the little girl. And this was back in, I think this was the 60s. And I always say the title wrong. It's either, well, let me find and make sure I know the title of this film. Bear with me, ladies and gentlemen. I should have had this with me. I apologize. Yeah. They've actually made this movie, they remade this movie back in the 80s, but the original movie came out in 1956. It's The Bad Seed.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of the most horrific films. This is horror at its best, in my opinion. And the things that happen in this film, it just is mind-boggling. And just to set it up, a housewife suspects that her perfect little girl, her 8-year-old daughter, is a heartless killer. Now, here's a situation where the things that happen in the film, unlike other horror films, unlike other films of that type of genre, didn't need a whole bunch of props, didn't need a whole bunch of goobly goos and none of that stuff, because the things that this little girl does could happen in real life. That made this very horrific for me. And watching this little girl be manipulative, watching this little girl be heartless, watching this little girl be everything other than a really nice person.
What is interesting is also that where the real element of horror comes in is how the family handles it.
Yes, and that really boggled my mind because I'm like they could have handled this so much better, and things could have been so much more. Especially the mother, she handled the situation. Here's that word again. She handled the situation horrifically.
Oh yeah, and it's almost like, yes, I did that too when I was your age.
Right.
Holy,
That's right. It's like really.
what's interesting is in one of the remakes, there were several, it was done in 1963, starring Elijah Wood and Macaulay Culkin, called The Good Son.
No, not 1963. No, that had to be 83, right?
93.
93. Okay, yeah, yeah. Redone with boys instead of girls.
Yeah, and now it's a very different movie. It's not the same thing at all. But rather than see the evil from the point of view of an audience, as we do in The Bad Seed, we see the point of view of the evil happening around him through one of the kids.
Yeah.
So Elijah Wood, we see the story through his eyes, and there it changes the film. Now, this is not a great film by any standard, except it does some things that good horror movies do. It brings us in and lets us be a part of horror. And I have to mention this.
Excuse me.
There's another Alfred Hitchcock film that, to understand what I mean about what real horror is, the movie Rope.
Oh, that is okay. If it comes down, I got to interject, Larry, and I'll be brief. If it comes down to really, really good Hitchcock, that is my favorite Hitchcock film. Go ahead, Larry.
Now, technically, that film was shot in 2 shots. And the reason why was he was not given the right to edit the film. So he didn't want the studio to screw with what he did. So he shot it in 2 shots. The whole film, unbroken, except for once in the middle. If you know what to look for, it's obvious where it is. There's no cutaways.
Excuse me for
in this film. There's no cutaway shots. It's all just flows, apparently seamlessly from the beginning to the end. Second, the movie opens up as these 2 guys are killing someone. And then they decide to throw a party. And they invite all their friends and their favorite to this thing. And it's almost, what was that famous murder in Chicago? Loeb and something happened in the 20s or 30s. Let me get this. It's almost kind of like that, where 2 people decide they're just going to kill someone.
Yeah, and it's pretty sad. They just decided they were going to kill someone just to see if they could get away with it.
Then what they do is they put the body in a box, and they put the box in the center of the room, and they throw a party.
Actually, wasn't it? Didn't they make the chest like a table?
Yeah,
and so put everything on top of the table, and so the person who died would be there.
Somewhere in the middle of the film, they notice that the rope is out from underneath the table, and it scares them a little bit. And what's interesting is that everybody's talking to each other, including the camera. That's important. somewhere in the middle of the film or towards the end of the film, we realize that they were talking to us.
Right.
There wasn't two murderers, it was three.
Because we were there. That's right. That's right.
And I did not have strangled him, but I aided and abetted.
That's right. We were involved in the whole thing.
I am responsible for this film, and Hitchcock does this perfectly. And this is what I mean by horror. It takes something that's inside of us and puts us there and says, look, you're sinful, and here's your sin. What are you going to do about it? And it's amazing. That's from the sin point of view. You can just say my imperfection if you want to get the religious element out of it. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. The more you think about it, and the second or third time you see it, you start seeing it differently. You start seeing the movie as, rather than as just a film goer watching it, you start seeing the movie like, oh yeah, I witnessed that.
Right.
I was there. And it's really incredible. Hitchcock did a brilliant job with that. And that's what I mean by true horror. Is there scary moments on it? Not really.
Not really.
But does it make me think about my own mortality? Yeah. Does it think about my own culpability? Absolutely.
And here's another element along with that. We're not shocked by what transpires. What was shocking was Jimmy Stewart's character when he becomes involved in the situation. That was shocking. And how astute he was, and how observant he was, because he realizes something's not right. Yet us, as the viewers, as they would say in football, the 12th man, as us as being watching what happens, we're watching this happen, and we did nothing, as you alluded to, Larry, and we did nothing to stop it.
You know, there's a good book, a good film, a good play, a good art. It finds our emotions, and we allow it to. That's important. We allow it to, and it shows us something of ourselves, not just the piece of art we're enjoying. And have you ever gone to a movie, Greg? Have you ever gone to a movie or watched something streaming, and what happens just makes you mad?
Sure.
And you want to yell at the screen.
Yeah, a lot.
Behind you, look. You know, from that point of view, or like in Henry Fonda's film 12 Angry Men.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, come on, listen to each other. Stop, why are you doing that? And we start having a conversation, for crying out loud. We have an experience. We have an emotional relationship with this work of art. Mm-hmm. And this is important, because it's our relationship with art that helps. My relationship with art helps me define art for me. Art that I like, a movie that I like. Well, what do I like about it? Well, the first thing is my relationship with that film. It's how I saw, where I sat, even, or it could be just a story I liked, but it's how I relate with that film. And maybe I'm the type of person that just like a good story, I don't care if it's scary or not. Or maybe I'm the type of person that likes to immerse myself in what's happening. Everyone's different, and we all have a different relationship with that film. When we're talking about horror films, what they're trying to do is, a good horror filmmaker is trying to give us the avenue of a relationship. Mm-hmm. And a very specific one. So you could almost say it's propaganda, but it's not necessarily. There have been horror films that have been heavily propaganda, but most aren't. And they try to manipulate our viewing experience to a certain, very specific focus that allows us or demands for us, better yet, to open that part of ourselves that is vulnerable to the action in the film, to the visual narrative that's being shown in front of us.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Before we get out of here, I wanted to go back to Wes Craven briefly. We talked about Nightmare on Elm Street. We talked about Scream, which are more the prolific films and very much express the Wes Craven ideology. But there are some other films that I really like too. You had mentioned on Blog Talk Radio Music of the Heart, which was a really good film, and I'd seen it more than once. But a movie that I really liked was Red Eye. Here we have a situation where a woman is manipulated into doing the evildoer's bidding, and he's doing that so that basically he's not caught and he has a fall person. But what's interesting about this film to me is, as evil as the evildoer is, we find, and you were talking about this earlier too, Larry, we find that the person who is being preyed upon, the person who is the victim here, flips the script, which goes to prove that just because you're a victim now doesn't mean you'll always be a victim. That's the first thing. Secondly, you're just as capable as the criminal, as the evildoer. You're just as capable of being evil, just as capable of flipping the script, and now you're the predator. This is a perfect example of that in this film.
Well, here's a film that does that as well, a very different way, but The Night of the Hunter.
Yeah.
And that's one of the, talk about horror. That is one, and talk about a scary movie.
And it's funny because, again, we don't have all those other shadowy elements that are in this film that what a lot of people are being brought up to see and be a considered horror and creaturey type film. It's just the people. And that in itself is just excruciatingly horrifying as anything else, and terrifying as anything else.
And again, what helps make it work, and it's children are at risk. And this, again, in our culture, that tells us a lot. That tells us, that prompts us for something, that fight or flight attitude that's inside of us. And in all horror films, they try to shake that fight or flight, emotion within us.
Uh-huh.
And we know it's a movie, so we're not going to fly out of the theater.
Right.
But we can't fight it just on the screen. So what do you do? What do you do with that? And that's a part of it. That's a part that balance between those two things. It's a good horror film knows how to use that brilliantly. And
I'm a fan of Robert Mitchum, and I know his coming into film was quite a different story on its own, but he does an excellent job in scaring the heck out of me in that movie. He was pretty rough.
So, Greg, knowing this is October and we only have a few minutes left, what is that? If somebody was going to come up to you and say, Mr. Morgan, sir, what, and ask you if there was one, movie to watch for this holiday, for this Halloween season, what would you suggest? If there was just one.
Just one. That's hard. Because I have a part of the horror genre that I probably like more than anything else, and you know that's what that is for me. Um, well, let me tell you this. One of the best actors, in my opinion, when it comes to this genre, that scared me the most as a child is a movie that I fall back on, the character I fall back on every time, and that's Christopher Lee. Now, those of you who are not familiar with Christopher Lee, um, in today's day, Christopher Lee played in Lord of the Rings as the evil sorcerer. Um, I can't think of his first name. Zoran the White.
Yeah.
Zoran the White.
Sorry, I'm in the white.
And so he's noted for many films that he played in his illustrious career, but the character that he played that I thought was the most horrific was Dracula. So any Dracula film with Christopher Lee would be my suggestion for Halloween, because they have different titles. I'm trying to bring up Christopher Lee now. What about you, Larry?
Well, in a way, it's an unfair question. I kind of knew what I was going to answer before I said it. If there was one film, I'd have to do. Came out a long time ago,
Mm-hmm.
and it freaks me out even today when I watch it, and that is Psycho, 1960. Perkin.
Anthony Perkins, Janet, yeah.
You're talking. This film really does it. Hitchcock doesn't just create the modern horror film with this movie. He doesn't just create it. He anchors it, and he says it's for that type of horror film, for the bump in the night, for the something lurking in the shadows, for I'm not expecting anything. I'm taking a shower. What? There's a man stabbing me, or a lady stabbing me.
Right.
You take a safe moment, and suddenly it's not safe, and you are caught unawares. He's the guy who started. He's the guy who started this thing. He anchors it, and he says, "No, now beat this." I don't think anybody. I don't think, and though we start talking about Wes Craven, I think Wes Craven, given a little bit more, time, or maybe in a different situation, could have gotten close. But I'm sorry, Psycho's is for me. A lot of people don't like it. A lot of people look at it and go, "Yeah, I know." Well, that's because it's been so made a part of our culture, and I think everybody has seen it chopped up with commercials on television.
Yeah, I think it's a great film, Larry. I'll be honest with you. We have the one advantage that you and I have is we saw these things a lot younger in our lives, when a lot of this, for lack of a better way of saying it, a lot of the special effects and things of that nature have taken over. I'm not saying that they've done a horrible job or a bad job, just taken over from those things that are even much more hard for us to really watch, and that's the human experience. And know that these types of people exist in the world. That's the horror. That's the scary part. And that's what makes that such a great movie. And Hitchcock does that pretty much throughout all of his movies.
If you take a look at there's some films within this genre of scary movies, horror movies, that that you remember because they changed the genre. Hitchcock establishes horror, but it had been around before, but he establishes horror in a new way.
Mm-hmm.
and then then you have Texas Chainsaw Massacre that goes way over the top, and then you've got things like what am I thinking of? The Exorcist, which again just totally takes it in a new direction and adds things to it that an element of storytelling that hadn't been seen since Hitchcock. And then you've got Halloween, which starts all the slasher films. Psycho is, though it has someone with a knife, it's not a slasher film.
No
mistake.
No. It is a. That's a good way to describe Psycho. Well, the title itself, it's a psychological thriller,
right?
Where someone has a malady that is driving them to do what they're doing, and it's not kill to kill; it's kill for a purpose.
And what's also interesting is that a good part of the film we identify with Norman Bates,
and that's the point. That's again what makes it creepy. It's creepy.
Whereas in Halloween, we don't really identify with Michael Myers.
No,
we don't. I mean, but we do identify with Jamie Lee Curtis's character.
Sure.
And but it's meant that way. It's meant to be that way.
Right.
And you take this entire line of films since 1960, and you bring it up to Wes Craven, and I think he did an admirable job. I think
so too.
Especially Scream movie, Scream 1, and Nightmare on Elm Street. I think he should be right up there with the American horror film pantheon. I think he deserves to be mentioned. And ladies and gentlemen, when you watch these movies, please don't watch ones that have a commercial in the middle of them. I know that it's hard to not to do. Try to see it unbroken.
Yeah.
And a big screen is better. A big screen is better. It allows ourselves to immerse into it more. Don't get up to go to the washroom. Don't pause it. I know we do that now. It's part of our culture. But just let it move.
Let it totally resonate.
Good films have a pace to them, have a rhythm, and you break that pace, you break that rhythm, and something's lost. And if you're going to enjoy them, then enjoy them. And I hope that you do. I hope, as a movie viewer, you try to experience these films in the way they were intended.
Good point. Worth reiterating. Don't break the pace. Watch the film in its entirety, and you'll enjoy it more. Mm-hmm. I wanted to quickly go back to Christopher Lee again, since you asked me about what was creepy for me and the movies that I enjoyed. So we have Count Dracula, which came out in 1970. We have Taste the Blood of Dracula. We have One More Time, and we have Scars of Dracula. All of these came out in the 80s. I mean, in the 70s. And Christopher Lee is Dracula, and Peter Cushing is Van Helsing. So if you get an opportunity to see these films in their entirety, I suggest you do so.
And you know what's really cool is that Van Helsing, played by Cushing, is almost as scary as Dracula.
That's the whole thing. He is so obsessed that they've almost got to tame him. They got to pull him back, like, doctor, you're going a little out. We're looking at you like, what is your problem? There's something wrong with you. And it goes back to almost that um, the like the TV dramas, uh, crime dramas nowadays, where you have the profiler, and they're got to be the point where they're thinking so much like the criminal that they're like a criminal. Well, a good TV show would be um, as what is it? Law and Order: Criminal Intent, because they're looking at these criminals as if they were criminals. What would I do if it was me who wanted to take someone and wring their neck? They're looking at it like that. Yeah, Peter Cushing was out there as Van Helsing. He was totally out there, but it added to the experience.
Yeah. Now, stuff that's going on today on television, you've got Scream Queens, which I've seen them. They're okay. They're not really scary. They're camp, and they're meant to be camp. But it's okay. As far as scary movies that are out there right now, there are a few out there. And frankly, I'm disappointed with all of them. Because I said that, I'm not going to tell you which ones I liked or didn't like more or less. You have decided. You may love them, and you may contact us and say, Larry, you are crazy. You're right, I am. But when it really comes down to it, again, you like the movies you like. And I want to mention one other thing about Christopher Lee, because, again, you mentioned he was probably the first one who was successful at taking Dracula's cloak off of Bela Lugosi and putting and giving us a new face for him, for Dracula. That took a lot.
It did. It did. And he is very successful at it. I must say so myself.
Yeah.
Now, there is one film that I haven't seen yet, but I'm going to pose people out there listening and watching us that you take a chance, an opportunity to see, and let us know what you think and whether or not this is because this is more of a fantasy horror, I would think is a better way to say this, and that's the new movie that came out this month, I think, already. I haven't seen it yet, but it's Crimson Peak. I'm curious to know what people think about Crimson Peak. As far as new horror movies. And
I haven't seen that yet, so with the new ones that are out, I'll have to take a look at that one.
And also, too, Larry, you were talking about TV shows. There's a TV show that's out there my brother was telling me about, and my niece, and that's American Horror Story.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is supposed to be pretty out there, kind of scary, kind of bizarre kind of television. So I'm going to take a look at that too.
Yeah, and it's been out there for a few seasons.
Right, I know.
Right.
They told me it probably 3 seasons ago, but
yeah,
looking at a lot of film and looking at other TV shows, because I'm kind of a crime TV show guy, I've just taken my time to embrace it.
It came out in 2011, and it's on the FX network. Some of the episodes are real good. Some of them are real good, and they're very scary. And if you want to have a good scare, some of them are excellent. Some of them are predictable. There's one television show that I liked a lot, because it almost defines me, is Doctor Who. And the David Tennant Doctor Who had one horror film that was absolutely great. It's called Blink. Again, on television, it's real good and it's real scary until the very end when the doctor comes and saves the day. But it's worthwhile. Also, going back to television horror, Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah, it's a decent movie. Better series.
The series is much better, but there was one episode that was excellent, and I believe it was called Hush. That's when everybody in Sunnydale lost the ability to talk. Uh, and yep, it was called Hush, and it was came out in that particular episode was in '99. Scary as all you know what. That worked for me really well. Anything
All
else?
right. No, I think we've saturated our time and our for lack of a better way of saying it, our horror minded
Are
essence.
we all scary movied out?
Maybe not out, but for tonight. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thanks again for hanging out with us after our show here on our movie channel for a real point of view. Uh, Hangout on Air and also YouTube. So if you get an opportunity, you want to review any of the things that we discussed today, you can hang out with us at A Real Point of View on Blog Talk Radio or A Real Point of View at our YouTube channel. So thanks again for listening. Make sure that you do yourselves a favor this Halloween and find a really horrible, creepy, just terrible movie to see. And you might want to start with Wes Craven films. The films of Exorcist. Also mentioned the Christopher Lee films, the Dracula films, and Psycho. All the different films that we mentioned today would be great to sit back and watch in the dark. Well, thanks again for hanging out, Larry, and I will see you next week here on A Real Point of View. Take care, everybody.
Peace.
Peace.